You're very welcome. This is Fintan Dunne with The Beautiful Truth and a special report on the weeks now leading up to the Commission of Investigation into Mother and Baby Homes and its report due in the middle of February, and legislation expected from government and other developments. I'm also going to take a look at some stories that have come out in the last few weeks and even today, in fact, which signal what we're headed into and the challenges that lie ahead. Okay, so the Examiner has a story today, and it's a story. State's reaction is to deny, delay, and to buy silence. And Conal O'Fahirda for the Examiner writes that the Taoiseach's following a well-trodden path of treating the Magdalene laundries, mother and baby homes and illegal adoptions as separate scandals, and not just one scandal. Magdalene laundries, mother and baby homes, industrial schools, illegal adoptions. Taoiseach Leo Varadkar listed them out to the Pope in Dublin Castle this summer. That this sorry litany of scandals are a stain on our state, our society, and also the Catholic Church. In doing so, he trod a well-worn path of previous governments, treating all these issues as if they're separate and distinct scandals, instead of part of the same story. So that's a good focus, and it's a great graphic of see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil, Taoiseach Leo Varadkar. But, you know, it's interesting. It's the second critical story of the government coming out from the Examiner in the last week. So this is the second one. So the Examiner ahead of the report seems to be growing some teeth. And I wonder why. Because they've been a toothless organisation up until now. If you're talking about this level of collusion, it's 4 years too late to be talking about it now, Conal, because Irish First Mothers was the group which rejected the Commission of Investigation when it was proposed, and the details were announced by Minister at the time, James Riley, who was Minister for Children and Youth Affairs. The only group to reject it, and the group which the Cork Examiner has sidelined in its reporting of these issues. We're the ones who've been saying this for the last 4 years, and the Examiner has been making sure, and Conal O'Fahirda has been making sure, that those views of ours have gotten very little currency. So, a bit late now to be saying that mother and baby homes, Magdalene's, industrial schools are not individual aberrations. Narrative, writes Conal O'Fahirda, and the controlling of a narrative has always been an important method of limiting the impact of this story. Indeed, and there's nothing more important in the narrative than controlling the narrative of the media. And the Examiner has been part of the problem here and not part of the solution. So moving on from that, and I'll turn to some stories which have broken in the last few weeks and which will also help illustrate the nature of the beast that we're dealing with here. And this one here is a story about a man who was aged 12 when sent to an industrial school over stealing some food and a £1 coin, and ended up having to go to court in order to get justice. He, because of psychological reasons, didn't apply in time under the redress board scheme, and he made a special appeal then in order to make the case that there were good reasons why he hadn't applied within the term limits. And he was rejected not once but twice by the redress board. Finally having to go to the Supreme Court in order to get justice in this case. So, you know, that's the nature of the beast that we're dealing with, that even where there are redress schemes in place, they are inflexible and don't take account of the humanity of the situation. Here's another story. It's as disturbing, if not more so. And it reports conversation between Taoiseach Leo Varadkar and Catherine Connolly in the Dáil over the issue of the failure to publish a report into the rape of 3 children while in foster care. Now, Catherine Connolly took Taoiseach Leo Varadkar on that, saying that he knew well this case, he knew well that this report should be published, and that he was in fact standing over a cover-up. The Taoiseach rejected that claim by Catherine Connolly and said that there might be good reasons why the report hadn't been published, and that he would be getting on to Minister Zappone to see like what the reasons might be. So these games go on. So when you, and that involves the 3 children at the time, this was 2003 and to 2007, are now adults, and an individual was convicted in this case, but of course this would embarrass the social care systems in Ireland up to and including Tusla. So anything that would reflect badly on the structures, the ineffective in many cases and corrupt in some cases structures that Ireland has in this area, is not to be reported on. Another worrying story. Yet another one, and this also involves Tusla, and shows why it's so important to keep fighting this issue of what happened in mother and baby homes, because this is about baby forcibly removed from mother in maternity hospital. It can't be true. It is true. And in fact, if we go to the RTE website where that story comes from, baby forcibly removed from breastfeeding mother in hospital, court hears. It's even more explicit there, isn't it, as to what was going on in that case. And that describes, say, an application by a solicitor on behalf of a mother whose 1-day-old baby was removed from her, forcibly by a member of An Garda Síochána. Can you believe that? Now, the reason for this, the claimed reason for this in court, was that there was a danger that if the mother was aware that the social services were interested in the welfare of the child, that she might abscond with the child or whatever. And that as a preventive measure, and this woman's children, some of them are already in care, and she is a victim of domestic violence, and therefore as a preventive measure, they were taking the 1-day-old breastfeeding infant from the mother forcibly. Now, is that proportionate, do you think? Is that just the same old, same old? So this is going on. The Garda who was involved in that said in court that an element of force was needed to remove the baby, and she found the incident very distressing. And indeed, other healthcare professionals involved in the incident were, according to the solicitor for the mother, also very distressed by that action. Of course, we had some time ago a report also of another instance where an infant in foster care was removed from a hospital by Tusla because they determined that the fostering mother and family had been caring for that infant for quite some period of months, almost a year. And peremptorily that infant was removed. So these are the kind of actions which are taking place now. No wonder it's important to keep fighting this. And finally, a special report from the Examiner, as I say, the second one, this is the first one. Tusla, Adoption Board and nuns covered up illegal infant registrations and adoption. Now, that's a great story. And the reason it's a great story is this. Because in one place, if we go back to this lovely graphic here, because in one place, we have in that story, see no evil, and see no evil is the Adoption Authority of Ireland in that story. Hear no evil is the department in that story, and speak no evil, well, I think that's the media, actually, even though they're the ones hurling the complaints at the moment in this instance. And that story is about Jackie Foley, 16 years old, and in 1974 she signs an adoption consent in Besborough mother and baby home. And under instructions from a nun and in the presence of a solicitor and her mother, her child was given a bogus name and his birth was illegally registered as John Power, born to Micheline Power, neither of whom exist. Both invented, both ghosts. Now, that was Conall O'Farrell's story. It's a good story because it pulls together so many elements. You see, there we have something happening in the presence of a solicitor. In the presence of a solicitor. Hello? That tells its own story about the corruption of legal process, wholesale, in these wholesale illegal adoptions and forced adoptions in Ireland. Consensual adoption was the exception, not the rule, and yet the Supreme Court agreed that it would, or I should say the legal profession are of one voice in stating that IOTVB, a Supreme Court case about the privacy rights of a mother, is the predominant guiding legal metric in this issue, when in fact privacy rights were the last thing that were discussed with mothers. Mothers weren't given any rights of any kind, and agreements which would guarantee and safeguard the rights of mothers were the exception. The rights of families, yeah, but mothers were, generally speaking, not having any rights safeguarded. So this shows, with the presence of a solicitor there, that what was going on here was legal fraud, and that's an example of wholesale legal fraud. Now, the Adoption Authority was notified of this case in 2005. This is 2018. So that's all been sorted out now, has it? You'll say to yourself, of course it hasn't been sorted out. Nothing's been sorted out on this case. TUSLA have been aware of this case since 2015, and again, they have failed to recognise it for what it is, which is an illegal adoption. So the Adoption Authority has failed to exercise its regulatory function in this case. So you have to ask whether this case is a systemic example of failure, and which doesn't apply to Leo Varadkar, but which applies to the entire structure that we're dealing with here. So we have the Adoption Authority of Ireland, we have TUSLA, we have the Department, and we have none of those bodies acting in a way which safeguards the rights of those who have been victimised by the state. Instead, it's safeguarding the interests of the state. There is no way, considering the recent actions of TUSLA taking away an infant as they have from a one-day-old infant from a mother, as they have, overseeing a regime which contained the extraordinarily questionable practices of the falsification of a sexual abuse report against a serving member of An Garda Síochána, one which has been the subject of a public inquiry here, and their involvement in the hiding of cases such as reported by the Examiner there, where illegal adoptions are simply being not faced up to, airbrushed and ignored. Given all that, there is no way that you can put the records of mothers and survivors and families and adopted people under the auspices of any Irish state or semi-state structure. To do so will be to engage in a pretense that they won't continue to do exactly what they're doing today. So the forthcoming legislation, which is coming before the Seanad for its committee stage next year, on adoption information and tracing, that bill has to be rewritten. It fails because David Norris has pointed this out in the Seanad. I'm not the only one saying this. David Norris in the Seanad, at an earlier stage of this bill, or an earlier stage of another matter, related matter, said he couldn't understand why TUSLA were being given provenance in this issue, considering that the people in TUSLA, and TUSLA as an organisation is so close to the commission of these crimes against humanity, which is another thing nobody wants to face up to, including the Examiner. This genocide, legally under the 2006 Genocide Act of Ireland, and prosecutable by the DPP, were the government to admit its sins. Nobody wants to admit that. Nobody wants to face up to that. And I think that the government and the people who have overseen the last 4 years are well aware of how flimsy is the cover which they have spun around themselves. So very important for us to make sure that in the next few months, as these issues come to a head after 4 long years, that we make sure that they're dealt with comprehensively, and that the issue of genocide is part of that comprehensive examination of what went on. We have raised the issue of genocide. Irish First Mothers lodged a notice of genocide with the Attorney General in March and in April of 2016. And that issue has not gone away. The Commission of Investigation's report, in fact, will form a legal basis for moving forward with genocide prosecutions, because it will establish, I think, the framework which allows us to take out the Genocide Act, look at what it says, not what we think it says, but read the Act, and where it talks about religious groups and forcible removal of children and causing serious, grievous injury to the target group, where it shows that all those are signs of genocide. That's the context we need to be looking at the Commission of Investigation report when it comes. There are many things to be dealt with in the months ahead. There's the redress and supports issue for affected people, for survivors and mothers and others. There is the equal rights for communities that have been excluded from this process, like Protestant affected communities, and like people who, in inverted commas, didn't fit between the cracks in the paperwork, you know, and who have been excluded on the basis of arcane and minor points of failing to qualify for state aid. We need to expand, obviously, the illegal adoptions investigation, which is part of the strategy of breaking this up into separate sections, is that there is no one place where this is being investigated properly. And of course, it's not been investigated by a foreign judge, which is what we really need. And we need legislation in the months ahead as well, too, for the exhumations, which are supposed to take place in Tuam, and that won't happen unless the government is put under pressure. We also need to survey and extend our investigations to other locations speedily. Something the Irish Civil Service and government doesn't know the meaning of. Well, no, it knows the meaning of. It just makes sure it does the opposite of speedily, in the hope that they can wear people down and hope enough of them die and hope enough of them go away and hope that the state in the end takes over the structure which is investigating all this stuff and runs it as a little arm of the state and makes some money out of it, hopefully, for the insiders. That's been the way they've dealt with previous scandals. Why shouldn't they do this any differently? So in order to make sure that doesn't happen, we need to involve EU and UN human rights institutions and Irish human rights institutions to make sure that the genocide spotlight is shone upon this issue. I'm going to take a look in more detail at the issue of genocide. I will be back with a report on that specific issue and just laying out the case for genocide in another video presentation. But with that overview of the situation as it is at the moment, I'll just leave it at that for now and come back with a look at the genocide issue subsequently. You know, it's been a long battle, 4 years. This year, well, don't have to tell you how tough this has been for everybody involved. And also, it's tough anyway because the tactic is to wear you down. So, however, here we are now, just weeks ahead of a deadline which the government can't escape. Their commitment to publish the Commission of Investigation report by mid-February. Who knows, it could even come earlier. So don't tuck into the Christmas pudding too heartily, just in case we need you in form in early January for a move by the government. But I'm kidding. Anyway, I'll be back with another report, as I say, on the genocide issue. And in the meantime, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you very soon. Bye for now. Thanks.